now I have the pleasure to wish you welcome to the last hangout session for this eForum. Today we are so lucky to have Dr. Sarah Ruto, who is the director of the People's Action for Learning Network, the PAL network, which coordinates countries in 9 countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And Sarah Ruto's team today is the role of citizen-led in ensuring that no child is left behind, and she will focus on the work on the PAL network. And as usual, you're welcome to put comments and ask questions in our chat forum, and Sarah Ruto will have some time afterwards to also respond to your questions. So please, Sarah, we look forward to hear your presentation.
Okay, so thank you very much, and greetings to you all from Nairobi, where it is raining and we are hosting the Pope. And it's a pleasure to talk about the citizen-led assessments, and I'm just waiting for the citizen-led assessments, and especially why we think it's important in bringing a different kind of paradigm, a different kind of focus that is relevant to countries of the Global South. And I will be talking about it in 2 main parts. First of all, to talk about how we came to be doing citizen-led assessments, and then talk about what I think would be the 7 key features to consider. And if you go to our website, palnetwork.org, we have a lot more information there, but I will try and give it in a different way. So I'm just trying to, I don't know if everyone is accessing the PowerPoint presentation now. Yeah, so the story of the citizen-led assessment is really a story that began in India in 2005, 10 years ago. And India and the organization Pratham had been doing many things, especially in reading, but they felt that they were not able to really focus, and they didn't understand the scale of the problem at that time. And this is what they termed as the invisible problem, because if you don't really know what you're dealing with, then probably you're not able to come up with the right approach to dealing with it. And the problem then, which we know now more clearly, but 10 years ago, when everybody was talking about access was not very visible, was the fact that children were in school and were not learning. And many people were not able to separate the two, that, you know, there can be schooling, but not necessarily learning. And it therefore needed a sort of shift to be able to get to this understanding. And so they came up with what they call a crazy idea, that of actually going to every house, every district of the country, and doing a household-based survey. Because remember, at that time, and in many countries, whether you're talking about countries of the global north or even in the global south, we had national assessments were there, but these assessments were school-based. And so they felt that the idea of school is good enough, but doesn't necessarily answer the challenges which we have and the realities that we have in our part of the world. That the fact that, first of all, there are so many different types and notions of institutions, and when you just go to registered schools or public schools, you miss out this other category of children who belong to the right to education. And so the household was that is where you could get a sample, a representative sample that actually reflects the children that we have. And they did the crazy idea, therefore, going to 100 districts. And, you know, India is a whole subcontinent. So going to every single district meant going to almost 600 districts and doing collecting a sample and assessing each child they would get in the sampled household. And 100 days later, they came up with what was called the Annual Status of Education Report, or ASA. The results of ASA, were damning. And the initial reaction was simply to reject the findings, because it said that children were not reading at a very low level. You're talking about grade 2 difficulty, huge numbers, more than half of the children were not able to read. And if you went to even simple division, the statistic got even worse. So the natural reaction was to reject the findings. And ASA decided that we need to do this then every time until this simple fact becomes a reality, that actually children are in school and are not learning. And what they did, which was not very common at that time, was also then to accompany this with media coverage, to get a public debate going. And so we have seen that in India, in 2005, when initially nobody really appreciated the scale of the problem, you see slowly that then policy documents in education begin to accept and make space for the fact that there is a learning crisis. And then by 2015, you even had some state governments, not all, but some state governments moving from assessment, from findings, to actually doing some action, responding to the damning evidence that the children are not learning and trying to do something about it in the classroom. And this ASA approach that I've narrated inspired similar citizen-led assessments to start. So we have Pakistan, who crossed the border to go and learn what is happening over there. And they decided to name their assessment also ASA, because it had the same meaning of impact in the languages in Hindu that they could understand. So you had India and Pakistan doing the same thing. And out of their own volition, Pakistan decided to retain the design. And then from East Africa, we visited India in 2008. In fact, we met Pakistan when they were also on their own visit to India. And we went there, and when we saw what was happening, we decided that this is what we need. This is what will jolt action to help us at least, reinvent the discussion we had in education. And so when we came back, in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, we started Uwezo. And Uwezo is a beautiful word in Kiswahili that means many things. It can mean capability, it can mean strength. So depending on how you use it, basically, it is about getting the discussion that we need children who have capabilities, who are strengthened, empowered because of going through the education system. In West Africa, we had Mali starting Bekungo in 2011, followed by Senegal in 2012, and this year Nigeria is also starting. And Latin America, we had Mexico also starting the process. So from something that began in India because of a realization of their own context, we have the citizen-led movement growing and is now in 9 countries in 3 continents, and with growing interest. There's a growing interest from a number of countries who feel that this is what they need. It is an interest that has grown within. Nobody came to tell us that we need to do this. But when we saw, we thought that this is what is needed from our context. And I think that is the big difference, that it has been a demand-driven thing. Nobody told us that we need to stick to the design that India came up with, but we felt that that design was really good for us. There was no need of reinventing the wheel. What they had thought through was what we thought would help us respond to our problems. And so from this loose network, we now decided this year to actually call ourselves the PAL Network, or the People's Action for Learning. And the PAL Network currently consists of 9 countries who are all doing citizen-led assessments. And we have another interest of maybe about 6-7 countries who, once they actually do these assessments, will become members of this. We are hoping that we will be able to grow this network, at least in the near future. Our minimum is up to about 25 countries who are all conducting citizen-led assessments and actions that will be able to ensure that we bring learning into the center, because we believe that, and we are driven by the vision that we need a world where all children at least acquire the foundational skills that enable them to thrive. Why foundational skills? Very simple, because like if you're building a house, you start with a foundation. And we know that the stronger the foundation, then it means you can go into several stories of that house. So if we want children to thrive, to reach the very top, I don't know, to go wherever it is they want, it has to begin with the foundations. And the foundations do not just mean literacy and numeracy. That is where we are intervening. The foundations is broad-based. There are various other values that are very strong for the foundation. But the citizen-led assessment is very good in terms of just discussing and ensuring that all children have the foundational skills that are needed for them. And so this leads me then, what is the value of the citizen-led assessments? Why is it important to think about it? And I think broadly speaking, and what we have seen is that they do allow us to audit the education system, because we preach that it is important for children to access formal education. But what does that formal education mean? And I think the evidence we get through citizen-led processes, what it does is that, first of all, it liberates the data. For many years, data has been there, data has been collected, but data was a preserve of the selected few, of technocrats, of university people. But we have liberated this data. We have ensured that people who are kept off from these processes are trained, duly prepared, people who are in the villages. It is no longer like, I sometimes say, data collection processes has been very much like the extractive mineral industries that we find quite a lot in Africa, where it's all about taking but not giving back to the communities that have given this information. So citizen-led processes allow that possibility of actually making data meaningful, making it accessible, and importantly, enabling it to inform. And in India, for example, it has been able to inform evidence-based actions. For example, in the state of Bihar, which has statewide programs aimed at improving reading. In Kenya, it has been able to inform policy making. We now have the current policy document, the National Education Sector Support Program, the investment program guiding education, and the findings from UWEZO in Kenya have been able to inform and dictate a presence of a literacy and numeracy component. In Senegal, it has also been able to inform a commission that was appointed to think about education. So the evidence has, I think, been very good in generating evidence-based policy making. And this, even before going to the other things it has done, is an important contribution. But perhaps more important than all, which I think is really a very big value of citizen-led assessments, is that it has led to an unprecedented national conversation on education, on learning. And this conversation has broken the boundaries, has broken the barriers. We have had it discussed in FM stations, where people who would otherwise not discuss learning matters, competencies, are discussing it. So it has broadened the discussion to areas that it wasn't there before. And I think this is important. This is therefore a start of a movement that can lead us to move, because access is something that was a problem. We need to move to learning, and it is able to do that because of the process of involving very many people. And internationally, people who are in the citizen-led process have also participated a lot in the national discussions, using the evidence generated from those particular countries to influence, ensure that at least we're not talking of just access, but access plus learning. And the heads of the programs in the various countries are thought leaders in themselves who have contributed, sat in a number and variety of bodies and institutions to use their experiences and the information they have to also shape global education. For a long time, I think the global village meant a global North village. I think through this process, we're also seeing the global South village contributing actively in discussing and shaping policy making. And I think that is a good thing that we are doing. So coming then to what I, just selected features of citizen-led processes. I think the first thing about what we do is that we're not just about access, but we are asking, now that children are in school, are they learning? And we do this by administering very simple tests. The tests are pegged at grade 2 or grade 3 curriculum expectations of each country. The tests are basically in literacy and numeracy, and they're developed by a broad-based panel in which government representatives sit in through the respective ministries of education, but also teachers, other citizens and other experts sit and develop these particular tests. And the 9 citizen-led countries are actually developing tests and administering these tests in numerous languages. In India, it's over 20 languages. In Senegal, for example, 2 languages. In Mali, 4 languages. In Uganda, 4 languages. This year, they even increased them. So it is not just tests in, the normal English or French or those languages, but also in other languages that are languages of school in these particular countries. And the tests are very simple and they're very clear. I think it is important that visually that they can be understood. When you're saying that a child is at a letter level, what do you mean by that? And that they're at a word level, what do you mean by that? And this is very important so that even if a parent is literate or not literate, they can understand, and just by seeing that something is less complex than the other, that a story has more words and demands a greater level of expertise than letters do. So we feel that this makes us to be very inclusive of all sectors of, and not just, living this as an exclusive thing. And if you look at the tests, like what I'm just showing now are tests from Kenya, Uganda, Kenya and Tanzania. The next test is from India, Pakistan. They're all very similar. And remember that we never ever started off by insisting that we should have the same tests. But each country, after checking our syllabus, it brought us actually to the same complexity of the numeracy tests that and literacy tests that we have. The second difference about the citizen-led assessments is that we ask this question of whether our children are learning in the household. Remember, most of the other, or in fact, all the other national assessments are in. So most of the sample-based, national-based assessments say that they're random. But when you critically look, especially at the context of countries in the global south, we don't even have a full list of the schools. At this moment, as we are speaking, a school might be coming up, and this school is attended by children. So when you only go to the school, you leave out this other group of children who attend other types of learning institutions. So we feel that where you can get a sample of all the children, whether they're in school or not, whether they're in a public or private school, whether they're in a community or whatever kind of school is in the household. And households normally make very interesting choices because sometimes they send one child to a government school and another child to a different kind of school, a community school or a religious-based institution. So for you to understand those dynamics, I think the household gives you that opportunity. The other reason, other than allowing us this sample that is representative of our reality, is that it also, I think, helps demystify formal education. Formal education has always been seen as that thing that belongs to teachers. But when you take it to parents and they can see it, like you can see in that photo, where parents participate, even if just as observers, I think it helps to demystify and helps show that they can be part of this conversation of whether children are learning or not. And therefore, we go to the parents because if you want citizens to be active, they need to understand why, and they can be active if you bring it to them and not expect them to go to a school, which can also, in a sense, keep people away from it. The third thing is that we collect this evidence at sub-national levels, and depending on the country, actually our stratum is the district. So if you're talking about Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, India, Pakistan, Nigeria, the stratum is actually the district. And I have given the numbers. For example, in Kenya, they go to 158 districts, Uganda 112 districts from this year, 155 in Tanzania, in Pakistan 144 rural districts, and 27 urban centers. So you can see we have evidence of scale, and it's because the evidence of scale, I think, is more convincing. And perhaps the reason why national ministries of education have listened to the evidence from the various countries is because it doesn't tell a lie. You know, you take any district and it's almost the same damning information that children are not learning. And this has, I think, really helped with the policy making. And so these are the numbers of children that we assess. In India, a little bit over 500, 500,000 children are assessed in 577 districts, 340,000 households. So we are talking of really huge numbers. And in all the time, we are talking about 30 villages per district, 20 households per village, 1 school per village. And therefore, as the family of citizen-led assessment countries, each year we assess almost 1.4 million children, visit over 640,000 households. In fact, at one time we had volunteers from Pakistan, India, East Africa, all of them were in the visiting various households around the same time. So it's really an army of volunteers that we have who visit the various households. The fourth feature is that we conduct annual assessments. And there have been 10 rounds of assessments in India, 5 rounds in Pakistan and East Africa, and the other younger countries, 2 rounds, I think, in Mali. So there are annual assessments. And we think that it has helped to at least provide this pressure that there is a problem, there is a crisis, and something needs to be done. And these are the examples, for example, from ARSA. You can see every year they have gone to over 500 districts, trained over 1,000 master trainers, have had 25,000 volunteers, and they have done this every year. So it is a really mammoth effort to be able to do a citizen-led assessment as we do, because we think and believe that scale is very, very important. And in each of these times, we assess a child at a time. It's always assessing a child at a time. There is no group assessment. The fifth feature is that while we are global, regional, national, we are really locally executed. We work through and with citizen groups. These citizen groups must have a local presence, and this differs from one country to another. But the principle is that working through citizens and having volunteers. In some countries, they must be resident in those sampled villages. In other countries, they come from other expertise. Create information that can be used to influence conditions, not waiting for people from elsewhere, because we believe that we are the change that we want and we can do something. One doesn't just have to wait. You know, people do not just have to generate data. They can also be consumers of that data to inform themselves. And so the whole aspect of local ownership is very important. In East Africa, for example, Uwezo, the assessment is implemented by partner organizations and volunteers who must have a local presence, and they do not necessarily have to belong to education. They just have to have a passion for education and a belief in citizens. So irrespective of whether they are a animal husbandry group or a theater group or something or another, if they have that belief, then they qualify to be part of this process. The sixth thing is that we believe that we are more powerful together. And that's why we work with all types of people, like I've mentioned, with individuals, with government, through the bureaus of statistics, through test development. And this differs in country to country, but the principle is that You cannot do a national assessment alone. You must build partnerships. In India, for example, they've been very good in terms of building partnerships with teacher training institutions, and therefore developing a cadre of teacher trainees who understand the value of research and the value of information in order to inform them so that they can be better teachers. And we believe in the saying that if you want to walk fast, walk alone. But if you want to walk far, walk together. And we want to walk far. And that is why it is important to bring many other people in this particular journey. So in many ways, we see ourselves as a growing family rooted in the global south and being proactive in order to do something about the situation and the education that we find ourselves in. And the final one is that we believe that the evidence must be communicated. There is one gentleman called David Davenport who once said that never make the mistake of assuming that the results will speak for themselves. And we believe in that. We no longer have the luxury that you'll find in universities, where I worked before, of writing a very good piece of paper and putting it in the library and assuming that it will talk for itself. There is so much information overflow in today's world. You need to make it your issue that you can be understood and therefore to communicate it. And the process therefore matters. So discussions of the assessment begin at the village level when you're walking from house to house, where people go and visit the local elder or the chief or the person who gives information, explaining to them. That explanation is important throughout the process. It is not about the evidence at the end of it, but even ensuring that you inform other people. And once the information is there, it is presented in ways that communicate. Like, for example, you can see what we have from Tanzania, where you're comparing what a child, this is a grade 2 test, and yet children in grade 3, 33% of them can read it, but in grade 7, 81% can read. So you ask yourself, where are the almost 20% children in grade 7? How is it that they cannot read a grade 2 level text? So I think the way you present the information can also result in a more profound understanding that helps people to digest things in a better way. So presenting the data in ways that are understood is very important for us. So you're not going to get very interesting graphs such as these in our popular documents. Graphs that you need to have studied to understand how to read them. We think it is very important to present information in which you do not have necessarily to have been schooled in order to understand. And so we use ranking sheets, we use color coding, we use mapping, we use whatever it is that can ensure that people understand where they are in their learning in order to make a decision about where they need to go. In Tanzania, for example, we have created a little bit more pressure by, assigning members of parliament against the evidence from their districts. Again, because members of parliament normally make promises on education, that they will ensure access, that they will ensure an electorate that is learning. And if that is the case, then we present the evidence to show whether they are or are not meeting this promise that they have made to people. And we have also allowed and encouraged the media to come and also see what it is and to tell it in their own words. Because sometimes somebody needs to see something in order to know that actually you are not exaggerating. So in many ways, then the citizen-led assessment movement is really a story of addressing accountability through evidence of children's actual learning. It is a story of trying to ensure that no child is left behind because we are doing them a double disservice of even excluding them from the sample. And we are able to do this because we go to the household where at least we will be able to get a majority of the children. One of the main critiques that has been used for citizen-led assessment can probably be summed up by the phrase that you cannot fatten a cow by measuring it. Like I mentioned, we have been doing annual assessments. And there are people who, after the first or the second results, were convinced and agreed that there is a problem and were ready to move on. And then here we come the third year again, and you're doing the assessment. And so they've said, but surely, why can't you participate in changing the diet so that you can ensure that the cow gets fat? And there are two responses we have given to that as a family. The first is that we think it is still important to have a process that gauges the temperature, a process that will tell you whether you're making progress or you're not making progress. And so having the assessment is important in itself, because without it, it will not, we will not have the urgency that actually something needs to be done. But on the other hand, very many countries have actually decided to move, to respond, and see how you can move more to action. And so in India, for example, this year, they have taken a gap year, and they're doing the one trying to go to 100,000 villages, where they start with their assessment, see the level of learning there, and then build action based on the evidence. So that we are now seeing in India moving from assessment to action at one simple stage. In Pakistan, in their Palo Baro, let's grow and learn. They're also thinking about integrating the assessment and the action more. So in the 6th year, the Pakistan will probably have a different variation, different twist that also responds to this. In Senegal, this year they've also decided to invest more in coming up with remedial tools that will give people at least a tool to be able to respond to what the evidence was talking about. And so we can see that each country is still experimenting, learning moments are being facilitated, and it is a journey in which we are moving from assessment to action, from reading to learning. And that is the story of the citizen-led process. Thank you.
Really very inspiring presentation about household service, and I think we learned a lot. Since we did not see the presentation, we will make sure that that is put up on the internet afterwards. But I think still we got a very good impression about what we have. A couple of questions for you. First of all, as far as I can understand, this is mainly because we did an assessment for the young children. Is that right? Or do you also test older children in this study?
I'm sorry, the sound was very bad. I did not hear you.
You did not hear at all?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I was just saying that this was really a very, very interesting presentation. And also that since we did not see the files that you had, they will be put up on the internet afterwards so that everybody also can see the actual written presentation. But I do have a couple of questions for you. First of all, as far as I could understand, this is mainly a literacy and numeracy test for the younger children, grade 2 and grade 3.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've lost you where you were saying you have understood that this is a literacy and numeracy test?
Yeah, for the younger children, for grade 2 and grade 3. Is that right? Or do you test also older children this way?
Oh, the tests are actually given to an age group of children, and this differs according to the country. It is a test pegged at the grade 2, grade 3, but it is given to an age group. So in Tanzania, it is given to an age group of children aged 7 to 16, because the entry to class 1 in Tanzania is 7 years. In Kenya and in Uganda, it is from 6 years. So it ranges between 5 and 6 years to 14 to 16 years in the various countries. So it is given to an age group of children. And it is therefore because of this that we are able to get information that shows us that there are older children who do not have very basic skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. Also, I was wondering, is it just the assessments, or do you also collect the background, the information from families when you visit households?
Yeah, I think that is also the other beauty and of the approach that we use. And most countries have about 3 tools. The one tool is a village tool where we collect various village indicators to give us an understanding of the environment children live in. The other tool is a school observation tool because even though we are going to assess children in the household, we normally start from the school that the children attend. And therefore, we are able to get basic information like absenteeism, the conditions in the school. And then the final tool is the household survey tool. And the household survey tool, we are able to collect various indicators of the household and then assess the children. So through this very simple way, you can connect the evidence to the child's household characteristics and calculate a number of things, for example, the wealth quintiles, and you can also connect it to the school if they have attended the particular school that was observed.
Yeah, that's really very interesting. I was also wondering, because as far as I could understand, you have a very large samples, large coverage in this country. So could you say a little bit more about who actually does perform these surveys and what kind of capacity building you do for these people in order to enable them to do the surveys?
Again, your voice disappeared. If you could just repeat the question.
I was asking because, as I understood, you had quite large samples in each state. So I was wondering who is actually performing the survey and what kind of preparing do you do for the people who perform the surveys? How do you prepare them beforehand?
Okay. I may have mentioned that we have an army of volunteers. And because of various reasons, like for example, and I'll use this time the example of East Africa because up to last year I was managing the WESO assessment. In East Africa, we had to contend with the whole aspect of entry to the households and the whole aspect of language. And so because of this, we felt that it was better to get volunteers who come from the villages or enumeration areas that had been sampled. So, and they meet there's a particular criteria we follow that they have to have gone, have so much schooling, etc. And so these are the people who are hired. Remember I said we go to 30 enumeration areas in a district. So in each district, therefore, we actually hire 60 volunteers, preferably 30 young men, 30 young women, who are then trained. And we go through a various series of training using a cascading method. So we begin with a cascade and then it goes down. Of course, there are certain demerits with it. In a cascade, there's quite a bit that gets lost, but we try to ensure that our training materials are very visual, very simple, focus on what is just needed, that you mix theory and practice, because sometimes we learn better when we actually do the thing. So those are the people who actually collect the information. People who are hired, who comes preferably from those particular areas and who are duly trained. The other reason that we use people from those particular areas is also because of the communication aspect. When you have people who come from a particular area, who go to their village, see the problem, they remain with that information, then they are tomorrow's communicators. So you don't necessarily have to bring out somebody from outside. And a final one also relates to the expenses, because you have people who come from those particular areas. You don't have to cater for accommodation or sometimes transport a little bit, but not too much. So we give them a token that will allow them, if they need to get onto a motorbike, but mostly they walk from household to household to assess the children.
Brilliant. I really appreciate this presentation and also your response to the questions. I would like to really wish you good luck with the further work on this. I think it's very, very important work, and I can see that it's very important work to put education and the quality of the education actually on the agenda in countries. So thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to listen to you, and we really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. And goodbye from Hannah May, my colleague here as well.